Hey folks, welcome to another video from aplanetruth.info. I just did a piece on polio that created SV40 monkey virus that was brought over from Africa and introduced into the United States at the end of the polio epidemic and sold as a cure when in fact it was nothing but introducing more viruses and vaccines into the communities that go on to this day, as we got into, and I'll put that in the show notes. And this, it's a precursor to this piece here, so you understand how long this stuff's been going on. Well, today it's AIDS manufactured and engineered to target gays. The HIV hoax, 2,000 virologists cannot be wrong. Dr. Mullis, a Nobel Prize winner, said if there's evidence that HIV causes AIDS, there should be scientific documents which either singly or collectively demonstrate that fact, at least with high probability. There is no such document. Sunday Times, November 1993. Here's a bunch of different doctors saying the same thing. Top members of the establishment have carelessly, if not irresponsibly, joined the media in spreading misinformation about the nature of AIDS. Yale. Doctors. Charles Thomas, Johns Hopkins. The HIV causes AIDS drama represents the grandest and perhaps the most morally destructive fraud that has ever been perpetrated on young men and women in the Western world. There's a book, The Shocking Truth About AIDS, The History of AIDS, A Deadly Weapon, from Peter Duisberg. HIV does not cause AIDS. The point that everyone is missing is that all of these original papers Gallo wrote on HIV have been found fraudulent. The HIV hypothesis was based on those papers. How the lie began in 1980, Dr. Robert Gallo. It's a replication survival is totally dependent on the viability of the host cell. He's talking about the HIV retrovirus. If the host cell dies, the virus is finished. Get that? Dr. Gallo knew this basic fact. How CERN purposely ignored this fact in order to serve his own needs by claiming the virus was very mysterious. Somehow it mysteriously survived while mysteriously slaughtering T cells by the millions. This has never been observed. He contended in the past but failed to prove that the very same retrovirus caused a specific type of leukemia which is occurring in Japan. Now, I talked about in the previous vaccine on polio how it was causing, with the formaldehyde, causing leukemia. Problem, reaction, solution. The power position that a being of a top government official and scientist has allowed the erroneous label of leukemia virus to remain intact even though it was rejected by the scientific community. In 1981, it was proposed that an acquired immune deficiency, AID, was the basis for a new syndrome of the disease that appeared to be surfacing amongst promiscuous male homosexuals and intravenous drug users. Dr. Dirac at Duke University, recognized expert on infectious diseases, though admitting the prevalence of the drug's use and repeated multiple infections, ignored these well-known causes of immune deficiency and announced that this is truly a new syndrome must be due to some new factor. Continually, this group of scientists have resorted to theory, not fact, as to how the AIDS virus supposedly accomplished its dirty deeds. Mysteriously. That's scientific terms. 1983, Dr. Gallo, when he wasn't making wine, embarked on a mission to convince his fellow scientists in the absence of any scientific experimental proof whatsoever. Convince his fellow scientists in the absence of any scientific experimental proof whatsoever that another virus he discovered caused AIDS. At a widely publicized conference in Washington, D.C., the corporation Washington, D.C., Dr. Gallo announced that he had discovered the cause of the AIDS virus. He claimed the unearthing of new retrovirus, which had been named HTLV3, thus inferring that it was a member of the family of retroviruses he had previously discovered. His claim was bolstered by Margaret Heckler, who was then Secretary of Department of Health and Human Services, and was under great pressure to come up with an answer to the looming epidemic. Heckler announced, quote, "Today we had another miracle to the long honor roll of American medicine and science." She also promised that we would have a vaccine within 2 years, undoubtedly as a result of Dr. Gallo's grandiose urgings. That very day, Gallo filed a U.S. patent for an HIV test kit, which was destined to make him very wealthy. Margaret Heckler very quickly awarded a lucrative contract to AZT Burroughs Wellcome, British company, before the first scientific paper ever appeared in any U.S. journal. AZT was a drug in search of a disease. It had been sitting on the shelves of the National Institute of Health since the 1960s. It's an experimental drug that had failed as a cancer remedy and declared too toxic to use, which we'll get into in a little bit here. As you would expect, in 1986, the International Committee of Retrovirologists named HIV the cause of AIDS. By giving credence to the hypothesis in absence of proof, they became party to the conspiracy. It is just what would one expect when frustrated, unsuccessful foxes are left to guard the henhouse. Now here's Dr. Robert Wilner. Dr. Wilner is a medical doctor of 40 years and a whistleblower on the hoax of AIDS. He stunned Spain by inoculating himself with the blood of Pedro Tocino, an HIV-positive hemophiliac. This demonstration of devotion to truth he took was reported on the front page of every major newspaper in Spain. It also was on Spain's most television show and evoked a 4-to-1 response by the viewing audience in favor of his position against the AIDS hypothesis. When asked why he would put his life on the line to make a point, he replied, "I do this to put a stop to the greatest murderous fraud in medical history. By injecting myself with the HIV-positive blood, I am proving the point as Dr. Walter Reed did to prove the truth about yellow fever. In this way, it is my hope to expose the truth on HIV in the interest of all mankind." He tested negative multiple times, and then they suicided him again during the months of April, months of sacrifice. He died of a heart attack in 1995, and we all know they can give heart attacks at distance at will to people. This is a very important book if you can find it, Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola. Remember, Ebola was pumped out in 2015. If you can get this book, get it now, because the next epidemic, the book prices go up. It's a very, very important book. Washington, D.C., December 30th. After 3 years of investigation, the Federal Office of Research Integrity, didn't even know there was one of those, found that Dr. Gallo had committed scientific misconduct. The investigator said he had falsely reported a critical fact of the scientific paper of 1984, and he described isolating the virus that caused AIDS. And here's Dr. Wilner from 1994, his white paper called A Call for Truth. I eagerly followed the releases from the, quote, authorities about the progress of the disease and the involved explanations related to the behavior of new retroviruses, which was given the designation HIV. In spite of my relative ignorance about retroviruses, I became suspicious that something was awry when retrovirologists who had spent 20 years and the excess of $20 billion in research on viruses became involved in extensive apologetics with reference to HIV. They began to use the terms such as mysterious and intelligent in the ever-growing number of additional hypothetical explanations needed in an attempt to clear up the contradictions arising with reference to the original virus AIDS hypothesis. I underscore the word hypothesis to remind my colleagues that the so-called AIDS virus, let alone AIDS, every scientific pronouncement is without laboratory proof and is mere supposition. So here's a little more on the Burroughs Wellcome AZT sins of omission, getting into the approval process. This lady, Celia Farber, wrote this article on sins of omissions that she talks about how the AZT was said to have shown a dramatic effect on the survival of AIDS patients. But there was a tremendous concerns about the new drug. It was developed a quarter century earlier as a cancer chemotherapy, which was shelved because it was so toxic, expensive to produce, totally ineffective against cancer. The drug was not selective in its cell destruction. Very important. Drug companies around the world were sifting through hundreds of compounds in the race to find a cure. Cancer, they never find a cure. Burroughs Wellcome, a subsidiary of Burroughs Wellcome, a British drug company, emerged as the winner. Why is there a war on drugs if we have drugstores on every corner, folks? By chance, they sent the failed cancer drug, then known as Compound S, to the National Cancer Institute, along with many others, to see if it could slay the AIDS dragon HIV. It did, apparently. At the meeting, there was a lot of uncertainty and discomfort with AZT. The doctors have been consulted, knew the study was flawed, and that the long-range effects were completely unknown. But the public was almost literally banging at the door. Yeah, the public's demanding it. Understandably, there was immense pressure on FDA to approve AZT, considering climate fear and anger all around. Now, please go to my previous post on polio, where they show where all this was introduced with the SV40 simian monkey virus. to cause cancer. Now remember also that the article in here states that the drug was not selective in its cell destruction, okay? The doctor of the panel, Dr. Itzhak Brook, we do not know what will happen a year from now. The data is just too premature and the statistics are not really well done. The drug could actually be detrimental. A little later, he was also struck by the fact that AZT does not stop deaths. Even though they were switched to AZT, they still kept dying. Dr. Brook was not won over by the promise, if we approve it today, there will not be much data. There will be a promise of data, but the production of data will be hampered. He was the only one who voted against it. The committee was tended to agree with me, Brook, that we should wait a little, be more cautious. But once the FDA realized we are intending to reject it, they applied political pressure. The FDA Center for Drugs and Biologics asked permission to speak, which is extremely unusual. Usually they leave us alone, but he said, hey, look, if you approve the drug, we can assure you that we will work together with Burroughs Wellcome and make sure the drug is given to the right people. It's like saying, please do it. And in AZT, the story behind the first AIDS drug we need to get into, this is Burroughs Wellcome to treat the disease. And this was the Time magazine article. Scientists quickly injected AZT, a Burroughs Wellcome product, into patients. The first goal was to see what was safe. And though it did cause side effects, including severe intestinal problems, damage to the immune system, remember AIDS is an immune deficiency disease, and they're injecting AZT, which causes damage to the immune system. Did AZT give them AIDS, folks? Targeting gays. It's nausea, vomiting, and headaches. It was deemed relatively safe. In order to do so, a controversial trial was launched with 300 people. After 16 weeks, announced they were stopping the trial because there was strong evidence that the compound appeared to be working. One group had only 1 death. Even in that short period, the other group had 19. The company reasoned it wouldn't be ethical to continue the trial to deprive group of potentially life-saving treatments. Yeah, right. But the study remains controversial. Reports surfaced soon after the results may have been skewed since doctors weren't provided with a standard way of treating other problems associated with AIDS, pneumonia, diarrhea, and other symptoms, which makes determining whether AZT alone was responsible for the dramatic results nearly impossible. Some patients received blood transfusions to help their immune systems, introducing new healthy blood. There were also stories of patients from the 12 centers that were conducting pooling the pills to better their chances they would get the drug rather than just placebos. But even after AZT's approval, activists and health officials raised concerns about the price, $8,000 a year, $17,000 in today's. It was prohibitive to many uninsured patients and AIDS advocates. In your sense, it's become clear that no single drug is the answer to fighting HIV. So that's it for now. I hope this gave you a little insight that AIDS, and watch the previous one on polio-created cancers. Look at the number of deaths, folks. In the red there, it's in the thousands. That's 40 million approaching deaths since 1990 based on a creation of the disease that causes death. This is genocide. This is silent weapons for quiet wars. This is how they roll. They targeted AIDS. The SARS virus targeted only Asians. The designer viruses are real, and they're coming up with more and more. This was way back over 3 decades ago. And what do you think they have today? Time to wake up. Time to inform the sleeping masses. Please spread this around. Share with your gay friends. See what they think about all this. They should be outraged as well. Plain Truth out. We'll catch you on the next video. Peace, and love one another always.